Hey guys, joining me today is Wyss, and Ty is a counselor here in the Indianapolis area. He also runs a ministry to the LGBT community to reach out to them and to disciple them entitled Walls Down. Ty, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate that. So basically, I've been in a series of messages called Tough Questions. And we're dealing with some issues that are they're polarizing, they're tough in our culture today. And so the one we're dealing with this weekend is homosexuality.
Okay.
And so why don't you just tell us a little bit of your story?
Yeah. I grew up in Ohio, where what it meant to be male was just really a narrow version of masculinity. And to hunt, fish, farm, work on cars, use women, and drink beer was basically what it means to be male. And I just didn't fit in well with that. And I was also sexually abused when I was, from the time I was 9 to about 15. And so that was kind of where that started. And I don't know that made me gay. I do think it made me really insecure. And so it just kind of set me up for a lot of struggle. And so when I was around the age of 12, kind of in the midst of that, it was a super confusing time for me. But I knew that I wasn't attracted to women. I was certainly attracted to men. And so I kind of came out to myself when I was 12 and was scared, wasn't sure I was raised in a really loving home, but I wasn't sure how this would go over.
Sure.
And so I ended up coming out at 17, and my parents responded really well, but there was also a whole lot of confusion for them. They didn't really know how to respond in ways that would be really helpful. And so when I came out, my parents actually became Christians. And so,
Really?
I came out on Thursday and they went to church on Sunday and got saved that day.
Wow,
so,
that's a story.
Yeah, and so that was, my parents, my family are just good Midwestern moral people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of what helped us all to see, oh, wow, we really need Jesus. We can't just be moral Midwestern people. We really need Jesus. So I came out at 17 and it really just kind of walked into the gay community and really felt like I belonged there. And it was really one of the first times that I really felt like this feels like I really belong somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Around a group of men that feels like this feels like family, this feels like home. And so that was so that's a big part of just kind of growing up, how that kind of came to be. So
Interesting. And so how did you come out of that?
yeah, so at 17, when I came, I was just welcomed with open arms into the gay community and really had a really good experience. So it wasn't like it was something that I wasn't expecting. I felt like that was where I belonged. And so I dated men, went to pride parades, parties, clubs, was really involved in the gay community, and had a boyfriend that really just, I felt, treated me really well and made me the center of his world. And at the end of the day, my heart was just empty. And so I knew it wasn't my boyfriend's fault. There was something going on in here that needed something more. And I didn't know what that more was. And so I had been to church with my parents. My parents started going to church really, really faithfully. They wanted God to change me, but God ended up changing all of us. And so, but I went to church a few times. To their church, and their church really welcomed me. And by welcomed me, I mean just said, hey, we're glad you're here. They didn't give me their theological position on homosexuality. They didn't tell me what their beliefs were. I really already knew what their beliefs were, but they said, hey, we're glad you're here. And that really made me comfortable enough to just stay and experience the Holy Spirit, experience God for one of the first times in my life. And when I felt the move of God upon my heart, I had never experienced that before, but that felt like home. And so all I knew was that I don't know all about my sexuality. I don't know what God wants for that, but I do know that He's for me and that He likes me, which was really kind of a different story than I'd heard. I thought God made gay people and then He sent them to hell. And so that wasn't a God that I wanted to get to know. And so all my theology was turned on its head that day. And so that was the beginning of God proving to me, hey, I'm for you and I love you. And I don't just love you, I want relationship with you. And so when I was in the gay community, the relationships that I had were good. It just they weren't God. My boyfriend couldn't be God. And so that just kind of left me wanting more. And so I ended up waking up next to someone that I had no idea who they were, and no idea how I got there, no idea how to get home. To me, that was my wake up moment, and because that wasn't my value, those weren't my values,
Sure.
and so when that happened, I remembered that day in church, and I was like, well, God likes me, and I really need Him. I want to feel that day I did that day in church. I want to feel that peace that I felt, and I just kind of cried out to God, and I said, hey, I'm not asking you to make me straight. Honestly, I don't really want to be straight, but if you could give me peace, that's what I want.
Wow.
And if you need if you're wanting my sexuality to be surrendered to you, because I felt like that's kind of what He was calling for, I said, then you can have that. And I didn't know what that was supposed to look like. I felt there was just a tangible peace in my heart that I knew that I don't know where to go, but I know this is the right track. So that's what that looked like for me.
So then what happened?
Yeah, so I often say, nothing changed, and everything changed. So usually God will change all the things you don't think need changed, and He doesn't change the things that you think are a really big deal. And so God did not make me straight. He didn't take away my attraction for men, and He didn't make my life simple. But He did walk with me. I really felt like I was really walking with my Creator. And I had peace in my heart, and for me that was enough to follow Him. And so He didn't change my orientation, He didn't change my sexuality in that sense, but He did give me a lot of peace. And so I just started walking with Him the best that I knew how. What I knew was that God seems to not be bothered by the mess that's in my mind and in my heart. And contrary to a lot of the people because when I had come out, a lot of people left and backed up, and it seemed like God took a step in. So to me, God was not uncomfortable with me and with my sexuality, and so I felt like I could tell Him anything, even in graphic detail, and so that was really how I started to steward my sexuality with Him. I felt like He was teaching me how to steward the things that aren't the way that I would like them to be, and so. Part of that stewardship process was really less about being pure and more about being honest. And in my honesty, there was something about being able to steward my life in a purer way, if that makes sense. So
since that time, tell me about your life.
Since then, I guess it was a year after that I met my wife, and which was way sooner than I thought. I wasn't close to the idea of getting married, but I certainly wasn't thinking. I wasn't attracted to women, and so I just wasn't sure what God was going to do there. And I felt like He was just introducing me to this woman, and she was beautiful, is beautiful, but I'm not attracted to women. So. But she was interested in me, and she kind of made the first move and said, hey, I'm interested. And my thought was, I will just tell you my story, and that will make you not be interested. But she was, even when I was really honest with her, and I told her, I really don't feel like I have anything to offer you, and I don't know that I'll ever be attracted to women, so I'm not sure what I can really give you. And which is exactly what you want your future husband to say. Right. Is I'm not sure if I'll ever be attracted to you. And so, but we started to date, and God really had to reform a lot of my ideas about masculinity and femininity, and about sexuality and what that really means. And so, some of the big things that He did was He made me feel comfortable in my own skin as a man. And so, as Rachel and I began to develop this friendship, there was something in my heart that, and as we moved towards marriage, there was just something in my heart that said, there was like a longing to be intimate with her. And it wasn't a lust, maybe that I would have expected. I didn't know if God was going to trade lust for lust or just a desire for desire, because I was still very much attracted to men. And yet there was something going on in my heart that said, I want to give myself to her. And it wasn't full of lust, but it was full of longing. And I felt like, that's not typical, but it does seem to be biblical. And I really have let that ship sail. The typical life has sailed because that ship sailed a long time ago. But the biblical life is what I'm after. And I feel like there was something in my heart that wanted to be intimate with her, and that came along with attraction and desire, but it didn't look like lust for my own sake, fulfillment for my own sake, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we got married then, and we've been married for almost 10 years.
So, society tells us that if we don't celebrate the LGBT lifestyle, that we're homophobic or bigot. You have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really unfortunate way to view. I mean, like there's so much polarization of an issue, and what I have found is that, well, I mean, that mentality makes it feel like an us versus them, and so like as if I have to go to war with a fellow human, and I think that's unfortunate. I think that's what the enemy of our souls has created, as an us versus them mentality. But what's interesting is that I know a lot of gay people, I know a lot of Christian people, and neither community really seems to hate, like absolutely hate the idea of the other person, but seems to think that the other person views them that way. So most Christians would think, oh, gay people hate us.
Yeah.
And gay people, vice versa.
Right.
And that's really just not true. So this us versus them mentality, I think, has been set up by the enemy of our souls, and not necessarily what's really actually going on. And then, so I think that's a really important distinction to make, is when we get into relationship with people, they probably don't hate you as much as you think that they do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important distinction to make, and thing to remember when you get into relationship with people.
And I think, of course, the press has picked up on a small percentage of people on both sides that, end up becoming a voice.
Absolutely. I mean, and peace doesn't sell.
Yeah, exactly.
Conflict sells.
Exactly.
And so I think that we've bought into this idea that media has portrayed. So,
which kind of takes me to the next one. As Christians, how should we respond or minister to our friends or family that have same-sex attraction?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing is that we need to build trust with people. So whether they're identifying as gay, whether they are active in the gay community, whether they have a partner or not, or whether they're not sure, wherever they're at with that, be curious about their life, be curious about their journey. And I think one of the things that has been really unfortunate is that we are very concerned with not condoning someone's sin or looking like we approve.
Right.
And I say it's the number one evangelical fear is condoning sin.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's been taken so far. I don't want to give a false impression of what I believe, but kindness doesn't give a false impression.
That's good.
And that sounds really simple, but I think that's really what this has come down to is me being kind and curious about someone's life and asking good questions and just saying, hey, how did you and your partner meet? For many Christians, they don't feel the freedom to even ask that question because, well, you might get the wrong impression. It's like, well, they might just get the impression that I enjoy them and I'm curious about their life and I actually want to get to know them. And so I think that's a big part of ministering to someone is I want to build trust with you first. If people don't trust me, well, then I really have no business giving them my sexual ethic because they're not going to receive that anyway. And so in order to have conversations that could be polarizing or hurtful, I need to have some trust build up. So that we can actually talk about things that are deeper. So
they know we don't agree with their lifestyle anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not a shock. I mean, most of the gay people that I've invited to church, I've even kind of prefaced like, I just want you to know, I don't want you to be surprised if, that we have a conservative sexual ethic, and most of them have said, oh, I don't expect you to, but can I come and be welcomed?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really what a lot of people are like. I just want to feel safe there. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, we have been sold a bill of goods that says gay people don't want to come to church unless you're affirming everything about their life. And most gay people that I know don't think that way or aren't demanding that level of celebration or affirmation. They just want to know, can you be a safe person? And can I share with you my life and my story without getting 6 Bible verses immediately afterwards?
Yeah. That's good. So tell me a little bit about your Walls Down ministry.
Yeah, so Walls Down, I started in 2013 here local, and I felt like God was just putting on my heart, like, I want you to share your story. And I didn't really think it was going to be that powerful or life-changing for people, but it turns out that human issues span gay or straight issues. And so the way that I was starting to deal with my sexuality, or what God had taught me about intimacy with Him, really touched the hearts of a lot of straight people, which was really interesting. And so, but my heart was that there were so many roadblocks for a gay person to actually get in the doors and feel safe, to actually experience Jesus. And I just thought that was a tragedy. Like that one of the things that spoke to me most was when I walked into a church, someone said, "I'm really glad you're here." And I was like, that took me back, and that's a really simple thing to do. And all they did was say, "Hey, I'm really glad you're here." That made me feel safe. Like, oh, I'm not going to get a theological discourse on homosexuality.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was important. I just felt like there were so many things that became roadblocks that didn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
So there are going to be things that we disagree on, and things that might be deal breakers for people. But there's a lot of things that don't need to be deal breakers and that don't need to be roadblocks. And so if we can clear out a lot of the roadblocks to Jesus, then people can kind of make up their own mind. Because not everybody's going to choose Jesus, and not everybody's going to bow their knee to him.
Right.
Neither are all the straight people that meet Jesus
Right.
either, So, but I want gay people to have a fair shake at whether they choose Jesus or not,
Mm-hmm.
and not just some version of Jesus that has been presented. That's really not the true Jesus that I know.
That's really good. So in winding this down, Ty, any last thoughts or things that you think really need to be brought out that our folks really need to understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the whole issue of, I think people go crazy with all the identity labels and things like that. And I'm not against identity labels. I think that they can be helpful in describing our situations and how we feel. But God has really, anytime that I've gotten alone with God, I feel like he doesn't really engage me on whether to be more straight or less gay. It's really about, what does it look like for me to be his son today?
That's good.
And so this identity as a son, again, I'm not against labels, but I want to major on this identity as a son, because that's the identity that sets me free.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try not to be straight, I try to be a son. And each day I'm like, God, what does it mean to not look like an orphan, but more like a son today? And that is what I really feel like I try to hammer home in a lot of my messages.
And that's true for all of us.
Exactly, and it relates across the board, and
Yeah.
I feel like people really connect with that message, because it's a whole world full of orphan people that are looking for dad, and that's what makes somebody's soul feel like they're at home, is when
Yeah.
they're with dad, and that's why I choose Jesus today, not because he's made everything good in my life, but because he's made me feel loved and valued in the spite of all the things that made me feel devalued. So that's really a big part of my message, and I feel like it goes across the board. So
That's really good, Ty.
thank you. I appreciate that.
I really appreciate you being here
Yeah,
with us and
thanks.
sharing your heart and sharing your story. And thanks for your ministry as well.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
God
Thanks.
bless.
Yeah.